Good day. Today, let's take a look at your renal anatomy and physiology. Of course, we'll be taking a look at your anatomy of your kidneys and the physiology of your kidneys together with the formation of your urine. Okay. For your urinary system, this one is made of, or it consists of your kidneys, your paired ureters, one urinary bladder, and your urethra accordingly. For your urine, your urine flows from each kidney down to its ureter to the bladder and to the outside, of course, via the urethra. Okay, and so yes, your kidneys, that is the organ where the urine is formed, and your ureters, it will carry the urine to the bladder for temporary storage. Okay, your urinary bladder, that is, it functions to store your urine, and then your urethra, it delivers the urine for outside excretion. Okay, and so with that, your kidneys and your ureters, they are accordingly upper urinary tract, and then your urinary bladder and your urethra, they are located in the lower urinary tract accordingly. Okay, and so for your urinary system, this one filters the blood and return most of water and solutes to your bloodstream. Okay, that is for your urinary system, particularly your kidneys. Okay, yes, this one is a diagrammatic illustration of your urinary system. Okay, and so yes, again, your kidneys, that is a paired organ. Okay, moving on. You have your kidneys, you have your ureter here, you have your urinary bladder, and then of course your urethra. Okay, moving on, let's take a look at your ureters. Okay, and so your ureters, these are accordingly approximately 25 centimeters in length. And yes, they deliver the kidneys from your urine from the kidneys to your urinary bladder. And your urinary bladder, again, it stores your urine, and this one is shaped like a three-sided pyramid. And then your urethra, it will deliver the urine for outside excretion. Okay, your urethra for males, that is accordingly approximately 4 centimeters, and then for your men, that is 24 centimeters in length accordingly. Please note that during the storage of your urinary bladder at approximately 150 ml of urine, that is what they call this stored. Okay, and so it can trigger your micturition reflex. Okay, yes, your kidneys. Okay, and so yes, your kidneys, this one is your bean-shaped paired organs that are located in the posterior wall of your abdomen. Okay, and so for the purpose of this, or the function of this, or the physiology of this one, it conserve salts, glucose, proteins, and other additional materials essential for proper health. Okay, and so with this, it regulates your blood ionic composition, regulates pH, blood pH, osmolarity, and glucose, and it regulates blood volume, regulates blood pressure, and all. Your kidneys also have an endocrine function as they produce renin, erythropoietin, and prostaglandins accordingly. And yes, it can convert a circulating, not very active form of vitamin D3 to its active form known as calcitriol. And yes, your kidneys can perform gluconeogenesis. Aside from that, your kidneys remove toxic byproducts of metabolism from the bloodstream by, of course, forming your urine. Okay, and so it's capable of excreting urea, uric acid, and others accordingly. Your kidneys, that is a bean-shaped or paired organs located in the posterior wall again of your abdomen. Okay, and so it has a cortex, medulla, and your pelvis accordingly. Okay, and so again, it is retroperitoneal. And accordingly, as for the size and the weight, it is 25 centimeters long, 6 centimeters in wide, and 2.5 centimeters in depth. That is embedded in the perirenal fat accordingly. Please note that the right kidney is approximately 1 to 2 centimeters lower lower than the left one. Okay, yes. As for the anatomy of your kidney, you have here your uh, hilum, that is your concave medial border. This one serves as the entry and exit of your uh, the entry of your nerves, exit of your ureter, and what we call this entry and exit of your blood and lymph vessels. Okay, and so yes, as for the blood supply, you have here your renal artery. Okay, and so the blood vessel through which blood enters the kidney, of course, that is for your blood supply. Your oxygenated blood enters your renal artery, and then your renal vein, your blood vessels through which the blood leaves the kidney. That is for your blood drainage, and then of course your renal pelvis. This one is a funnel-shaped structure that is formed at one end by the expanded upper portion of the ureter. Okay, and so of course this one functions to convey urine or to, yes, convey urine to your ureters. Okay, this one is a diagrammatic illustration of your kidneys, of your kidney. Okay, and so you have your renal artery here, you have your renal artery, your renal vein. Okay, you have your cortex, and then the medulla, where you can find, of course, your renal pyramids. Okay, moving on. You have your calyces. Your calyces, these are cup-like divisions of your renal pelvis surrounding one or more renal papillae. And yes, your cortex, that is a darker stained region with many round corpuscles at about 1.4 centimeters in thickness. And yes, this serves as the exclusive site for plasma filtration because your cortical nephrons are located in your cortex, and then your renal columns, that is the portion of the cortex that extend between your renal pyramids. Okay, and then you have your medulla. Renal medulla, that is the inner region that has a stringy microscopic appearance. Okay, in your renal medulla, you have here your renal pyramid. That is, your renal pyramid is made of 8 to 15 conical structures accordingly. Okay, and so again, your renal medulla is, you have the renal tissue is shaped into renal pyramid. And then the renal papilla, that is the tip of each pyramid. And yes, it contains your papillary duct that opens into your calyx, into your minor calyx. Okay, and yes, your calyces, these are cup-like divisions again. Okay, and so yes, your calyces, you have 12 minor calyces, and these 12 minor calyces join together to form 2 to 3 major calyces. These are funnel, your calyces are funnel shaped to receive urine from the collecting tubules and pass it into your renal pelvis. And then from your renal pelvis to your ureter, then to your urinary bladder, and then to your urethra, finally for excretion. And then, of course, again, your renal pelvis, that is funnel shaped again, that emerges from the indented region of your kidney. Okay, and so with that, you can say that your pathway of your urine, you have from, of course, your nephron, from your nephron to your collecting duct to your pila, to your minor calyces, to your major calyces, and then to your renal pelvis. Okay, let's take a look at your nephron. Okay, so your nephron, this one is considered as the functional units of your kidneys. Okay, and so accordingly, each kidney they contain 1 to 1.5 million nephrons. Okay, again, that is your functional unit of your kidney that is located mostly in the cortex. And yes, you have in your nephron, you have your glomerulus or your renal corpuscle. This one is your uh, filtering structure. Again, your glomerulus or your renal corpuscle, that this is your filtering structure, and accordingly it has about 200 micrometers in diameter, and your glomerulus is made of, or it is a capillary tuft at around 8 lobes of capillaries. Okay, and so these capillaries are actually uh, divisions of your afferent arteriole. Okay, and then you have your Bowman's capsule. Your Bowman's capsule, this one is structure that surrounds your glomerulus. And yes, it is double-walled epithelial capsule. Okay, and so yes, your Bowman's capsule, this one is not part of your glomerulus. Your Bowman's capsule is the blind end of your Bowman's capsule is the blind end of your what you call this uh proximal convoluted tubule. Okay, and so for this one. Okay, and so and the purpose of this one is to catch, okay, and so your ultrafiltrate. Okay, this one is an illustration of your what they call this nephron. Okay, and so notice, of course, the red one here. The red colored one here is your what do you call this, blood vessels. Okay, the red colored one, your blood vessels, and then the yellow colored one here, these are your what do you call this, your tubules, kidney tubules. Okay, and so you have here, notice here that you have your Bowman's capsule encloses your capillary tuft of your, or your glomerulus, and then to your convoluted tubule or proximal, mas malapit or closer, and then you have your what you call this, your loop of Henle, and then to your distal convoluted, and then to your collecting duct, and finally to your renal pill. Okay. Yes, again, this one is another illustration of your nephron. Okay, and so yes, this is your capillary tuft of your glomerulus. Then you have your Bowman's capsule, your proximal convoluted tubule, your loop of Henle, your distal convoluted, and then you have here your collecting duct. Of course, the red one here again, this is your blood vessel. Okay, and so oxygenated blood is present accordingly here. Okay, moving on, your glomerulus. Again, this one is your filtration apparatus of the kidney. Okay, and so this one is the structure that is responsible in ultrafiltrate formation and eventually in the formation of your urine. Okay, eventually this ultrafiltrate, sorry, forms your urine. Okay, and so yes, this glomerulus has three main layers. You have the endothelium of your glomerular capillaries, your glomerular basement membrane or your GBM, and then your visceral layer of your Bowman's capsule. Okay, for your glomerular endothelium, it contains numerous fenestrations. Okay, and so it contains numerous fenestrations or pores. Okay, and so the pores here has a diameter of 70 to 90 nanometers. And yes, your glomerular endothelium lacks diaphragms that are found in other capillaries. And please note that your glomerular endothelium is rich in aquaporin 1 channels accordingly. Okay, and so that is for your glomerulus. Again, please note of your what you call this fenestrations or pores present in your glomerular endothelium, because of course this one, the selectivity of your barrier or your filtration barrier is based on the molecular size and charge of the solute. Okay, and so size, please note you have here what you call this, your diameter of your uh, pores present in your glomerular endothelium. Okay, and so they can restrict the size of molecules that passes through them. Okay, and yes, in addition to your capillary endothelium for to the fenestrations, it also possesses a negatively charged coating that repels anionic particles accordingly. Okay, again, you have here your capillary endothelium also possess a negatively charged coating that repels anionic molecules. Okay, and so for this one, and as earlier I've told you, I said that the selectivity again of the filtration barrier is based on the molecular size and charge of the solute. With that, the presence of negatively charged coating in your capillary endothelium, it also restricts your negatively charged molecules. Okay? This one is a diagrammatic illustration of the histology sorry, of your endothelium. Okay, you have here, of course, this one is your capillary tuft. Okay, you have your capillary tuft here. Okay, let's move on to your glomerular basement membrane. Your glomerular basement membrane, accordingly, it has three layers. You have the lamina rara interna that lies adjacent to the capillary endothelium, your lamina densa, that is centrally located, and then of course your lamina rara externa that is adjacent to the epithelium of your Bowman's space accordingly. And please note that your glomerular basement membrane is composed mainly of type 4 collagen fibers. Okay, also present in your glomerular basement membrane is your laminin, nidogene, entactin, heparan sulfate, proteoglycans, and multiadhesive glycoprotein. Okay, and so what is the purpose of these substances? They provide a physical barrier and ion selective filter. Okay, and so please note that your heparan sulfate and the other proteins present here that is located in the outer lamina rara layers, they provide the layers with their strongly anionic character. Okay, and so also they are anionic in nature. And yes, if they are anionic, they also repel negatively charged substances accordingly. Okay, and so this one is an illustration of your what you call this illustration of your still your glomerulus. Okay, moving on, your visceral epithelium. Your visceral epithelium, this one, your visceral contains accordingly your podocytes, and these podocytes are specialized cells with foot processes known as your pedicels that interdigitate with neighboring podocytes. Okay, and so please note what we call this, they interdigitate with neighboring podocytes. The processes actually accordingly do not touch each other. Okay, and so yes, they do not touch each other, giving a consistent space of 20 to 30 nanometers diameter. Okay, and so that accordingly separates them. Okay, and so yes, this space accordingly, or this interdigitation forms accordingly your filtration slits. Your filtration slits, these are snake-like channel that zigzags across the surface of your glomerular capillaries. And yes, this filtration slits accordingly covers 3% of your total glomerular basement membrane. Okay, aside from the formation of your filtration slits by your podocytes also are able, okay, and so accordingly they are able to phagocytose macromolecules that are unable to proceed through the slit diaphragm or through the filtration slits, or they are unable to return to the capillary lumen. Okay, and so because what they call this accumulation of these macromolecules in your visceral epithelium will cause occlusion of the filtration barrier. That is why to prevent occlusion, your podocytes again, so they will phagocytose these trapped macromolecules. Okay. And then you have your mesangium. Your mesangium, this one is within the anastomosing lobules of your glomerular tuft accordingly. Okay, and so you have here accordingly your mesangium. Okay, and so you have your mesangial cells present in this area accordingly. Okay, and so yes, what is the purpose of this one is to synthesize the extracellular matrix and provide structural support for the glomerular capillaries. And yes, please note that your mesangial cells that comprises of course your mesangium, they are smooth muscle in origin. Okay, and so with that, they are smooth muscle in origin. They have this, they are able to contract. Okay, and so they have this contractility characteristic. And yes, they are capable also of phagocytosis and pinocytosis. Okay, and so for this one, for your phagocytosis and pinocytosis, accordingly, it helps to remove the entrapped macromolecules from the filtration barrier. Same with the podocytes also. Okay, and so as for what you call this, the smooth muscle, okay, and so the contractility characteristics of your mesangial cells, they are able accordingly to control the blood pressure in the area. Okay. Okay, your Bowman's capsule, as what we said earlier, this is the blind end of your uh, kidney tubule. Okay, yes, your blind end of your kidney tubule. Your Bowman's capsule, it has a visceral layer that has an intimate contact with the glomerulus. Again, okay, and this one is composed of your modified epithelial cells known as your podocytes that perform a filtering function. Okay, and so they interdigitate with each other to provide you your what you call this filtration slits accordingly. Okay, and the parietal layer is composed of simple squamous epithelial cells. As such, proximal convoluted tubule, this one has two parts. You have your pars convoluta, or the convoluted part, and then your pars recta, or the what you call this, the straight portion. Okay, your proximal convoluted tubule receives the ultrafiltrate from the urinary space of your Bowman's capsule. And yes, you have your cuboidal cells with the following features. Okay, of course, that makes up your what you call this proximal convoluted tubule. The cuboidal cells, they have brush border or with microvilli. With this, they provide a maximal area for filtrate reabsorption accordingly. And then a junctional complex, a narrow tight junction, a plique or fold that is present, interdigitation of your basal processes, and basal striations. Aside from that, you have numerous, the cells present here have numerous mitochondria. With that, they have high metabolic activity accordingly. And yes, they have abundant enzymes necessary for active transport of various solutes. Okay, and so for your proximal convoluted tubule, because again, in your proximal convoluted tubule, that is what they call this, the site of major tubular reabsorption. Okay, for your proximal convoluted tubule. Okay, your proximal straight tubule or your thick descending limb of loop of Henle. Accordingly, the cells here are shorter or flat with less developed brush border. And they have also, it has a fewer and less complex lateral and basolateral processes. Also, a randomly distributed smaller mitochondria. It has a fewer apical invagination and endocytic vesicles and fewer lysosomes accordingly. That is your proximal straight tubule of, or your thick descending limb of loop of Henle. Okay, and so accordingly, this part. Okay, and so this area, the thick one. And then you have your thin loop of Henle. Okay, and so you have here, accordingly, in your juxtamedullary nephron, it has the longest limb, while your cortical nephron, it has the shortest limb of loop of Henle accordingly. Okay, and so you have your four types of epithelial cells that are present in your thin loop of Henle. You have your type 1. They are thin, simple squamous in the short loop nephron. And then your type 2, they are tall with abundant organelles and blunt microvilli in the long looped nephron. And then your type 3, your simpler structure with fewer microvilli in the thin descending limb of the medulla. Okay, and so that and then your type 4, you have a low flattened epithelium without microvilli. Okay, and so this type 4 is capable to bend. I mean, this they are located at the bend of your long loop to nephron. Again, your type 4 is located at the bend of your long loop to nephron. Okay, please note that in your thin descending limb of loop of Henle, you have here uh, your what do you call this, it produces a isosmotic ultrafiltrate. Please note again that in your thin descending limb of loop of Henle, it produces an isosmotic ultrafiltrate accordingly. Please note also that this one is highly permeable to water due to the presence of your aquaporins 2. And then your thin ascending limb of loop of Henle, this one produces a hyposmotic ultrafiltrate. Again, produces a hyposmotic or ultrafiltrate. And yes, it is highly permeable to sodium and chloride. Okay, and so because there is the presence of your sodium, potassium, and chloride co-transporters present in this thin ascending limb of loop of Henle. You have your thick ascending limb or your distal straight tubule. Okay, and so please note that it is 9 to 10 millimeters in length. And yes, the cells here are locuboidal epithelial cells, and they are centrally placed round to slightly, they have a centrally placed round to slightly oval nuclei, and you have few club-shaped microvilli. And yes, these cells manufacture Tam Horsfall protein or your uromodulin. Okay. Also, large numbers of mitochondria are present in this area, in the cells in this area. And yes, they have also a high level of enzymatic activity. Okay, that is for your cells present in your thick ascending limb of loop of Henle. Finally, in your distal convoluted tubules, your DCT, this one is 4 to 5 millimeters in length and has a wide open tubule lumina. The cells are locuboidal and has a clear pale cytoplasm with a few blunt apical microvilli. And yes, in your distal convoluted tubule, you have here your active secretion of potassium and hydrogen ions. Your collecting tubules or your collecting duct. Okay, and so the cells are simple cuboidal epithelium, and the cells have intercellular junctions between them that span from their luminal surfaces to their bases accordingly. And yes, in the presence of your antidiuretic hormone, the junctions or the intercellular junctions present in your collecting tubule dilate. Okay, and so making it highly permeable to water. In the absence or when antidiuretic hormone is absent, the spaces are joined tightly, making it impermeable to water. Okay, and so yes. Again, after what they call this, after 2 to 3 loops of convolution, the tubule proceeds to collecting duct. And please note that this collecting duct or your collecting tubule traverses the renal cortex and the medulla and is the site again of final urine concentration. Please note that it has 3 regions because of course it again traverses your cortex and then the medulla and then finally to your papillary region. Okay, and so you have 3 regions. You have your cortical, medullary, and papillary collecting tubule regions. Okay, and so comparison of your what you call this microscopic structure, though this one is a diagrammatic illustration of your epithelium of your collecting tubules. Okay, and so you have your proximal convoluted tubule. Notice they are somewhat taller, cuboidal. They are really cuboidal. And then you have your what you call these cells of your ascending thick segment of your loop of Henle, somewhat thinner. Okay, and so and then you have your ascending segment of your thin loop of Henle. It's very thin. Okay, and so for your thick, and then you have your DCT, your distal convoluted tubule, and then your collecting tubule. Okay, let's take a look at your what you call this blood vessels in your what you call this that surrounds or that are present in close proximity to your nephron. Okay, you have your afferent arteriole here that carries blood to your glomerulus. Please note that in your kidneys you have here your afferent arteriole will divide to form your glomerulus, and then your glomerulus will converge to form your efferent arteriole. And then from your efferent arteriole, this efferent arteriole will divide again, will divide, sorry, the arteriole will divide to form your another set of capillaries. Okay, and this feature is only present in your kidneys because, as a general rule, in the flow of, I mean, in the cardiovascular system, that from an arteriole, the blood should flow to your capillaries, and then from the capillaries to your veins, and then from your to your venules, or to, and then to your veins. Okay, and so that is accordingly the sequence. But then in case of your kidneys, it is different. Okay, your afferent arteriole accordingly carries blood to your glomerulus. The efferent arteriole carries blood from the glomerulus to the peritubular capillaries, and your peritubular capillaries surrounds the proximal convoluted tubule and distal convoluted tubule. Okay, and so again, this peritubular capillary surrounds your uh, proximal convoluted tubule and distal convoluted tubule. And please note that the proximity of this one, or surrounding, okay, and so the uh, is important, okay, in the reabsorption and secretion of substances. And then your vasa recta, this one is adjacent to your loop of Henle in the juxtamedullary nephron accordingly. Okay, that is for your blood vessels in your nephron. Okay, this one is an illustration showing your renal blood flow. Of course, from the what they call this blood supply to your artery to the drainage, your renal vein. Okay, and so please note that your renal blood flow has a direct relationship to urine formation. Again, it has a direct relationship to urine formation. And yes, 25% of your cardiac output is by your left ventricle is received by your kidneys, or that is 1200 ml per minute. Again, 25% of your cardiac output, that is relatively high, please note. And yes, your kidneys, it is susceptible to ischemia. Okay, it needs a lot of blood accordingly. Okay. Okay, and again, you have a total renal blood flow of 1000 ml per minute and a total renal plasma flow of 600 to 700 ml per minute. Okay, let's take a look at your renal physiology. You have here your glomerular filtration, your tubular reabsorption, and tubular secretion accordingly. Of course, for your glomerular filtration, the filtration apparatus is your glomerulus. Your glomerulus is located in the Bowman's capsule, of course. And yes, it is your glomerulus is a coil or capillary tuft and it's made of 8 capillary lobes. Okay, and so yes, and this one is a non-selective filter of plasma substances with a molecular weight of less than 70,000 Daltons. Please note it is non-selective. And yes, before I forget, your glomerular filtration rate is approximately 120 ml per minute, or that is one third of your total renal plasma flow. Okay, and so your factors that affect your filtration process, you have here your filtration barriers. Okay, in your filtration barriers, you have here the presence of your pores present in your endothelium or the fenestration. Okay, and also you have your glomerular basement membrane. Again, in your fenestrated endothelium, you have here the presence of pores and your shield of negativity that filters negatively charged particles. And then you have your glomerular basement membrane, and then you have your visceral epithelium that has the podocytes. Okay, and so that has the podocytes that forms your filtration slits accordingly. Okay, that is for your for your filtration barriers. And then you also have your glomerular pressure. Yes, your glomerular capillary blood pressure, this one is provided or yes, provided by your cardiac output. And this glomerular capillary blood pressure drives plasma ultrafiltration. Your plasma ultrafiltration in your glomerulus does not freely occur. And yes, the filtration again is enhanced by the presence of hydrostatic pressure present due to the presence or due to the differences in the size of the afferent and efferent arteriole accordingly. Okay, and so if there is a smaller lumen, then it will form a higher pressure somewhat. Okay, and so yes, your again, your cardiac output will provide the glomerular capillary blood pressure that will drive your plasma ultrafiltration accordingly. So you have your blood hydrostatic pressure at a 55 millimeters of mercury. And again, this one is provided by your cardiac output. And then your opposing pressures, the pressures that opposes your blood hydrostatic pressure, you have actually two. Your capsular hydrostatic pressure that is exerted by the fluid that is present in your capsular space. Okay, and it has a pressure of 15 millimeters of mercury. And then your blood oncotic pressure, this one is exerted by the proteins present in your capillary or in your glomerulus. Okay, and so please note that proteins, they have the ability to hold or to attract. Yes, they have the ability to hold or attract or hold water. Okay, and this blood oncotic pressure has a 30 millimeters of mercury. Okay, and so you subtract 15 and 30, then you have a net filtration pressure that is 10. This what you call this net filtration pressure of 10 millimeters mercury favors the formation of plasma ultrafiltrate in the Bowman's capsule. Again, your cardiac output provides your glomerular capillary blood pressure that drives the plasma ultrafiltration. Plasma ultrafiltration does not happen freely. Factor that affects your glomerular filtration, you have your renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system. Okay, and so this or your RAA, this one controls the regulation of blood flow to and within the glomerulus. You have here your juxtaglomerular apparatus. It's made of your cells. You have your juxtaglomerular cells and your macula densa. Your JJ cells, these are located in your afferent arteriole, afferent, and then your macula densa, they are located in your distal convoluted tubule. Your juxtaglomerular cells responds to blood pressure, a fall in your blood pressure, and then your macula densa responds to low plasma sodium. Okay, and so because if there is a low plasma sodium, there is also a decrease in water retention. If there is a decrease in water retention, it will also cause a decreased blood pressure. Why? Okay, and so please note that what they call this, your sodium pulls water. Okay, and so your sodium pulls water accordingly. Or in other words, kung nasaan po ang sodium, nandun po ang tubig. Or kung nasaan ang sodium, nandun ang water. Again, sodium pulls water accordingly. Okay, so okay, yes, your renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. Okay, and so please note that what you call this low blood pressure or low plasma sodium is the stimulus for the release of renin. And yes, renin is secreted by your juxtaglomerular cells in your kidneys, of course, or particularly in your afferent arterioles of your kidneys. Okay, so what does your renin do? It converts your angiotensinogen, and please note angiotensinogen is secreted or produced by your liver. Okay, your renin again converts your angiotensinogen to angiotensin 1, and yes, your angiotensin 1 will go to the circulation, or it will circulate, and as it reaches your lungs, it is converted to angiotensin 2 by your angiotensin converting enzyme. Your angiotensin converting enzyme, this one is present in your lungs. Okay, that is the site of conversion of angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2. What is the effect or actions of angiotensin 2 in your renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system? It causes vasodilation of the afferent arteriole and constriction of your efferent arteriole. Again, it causes dilation of the afferent arteriole and constriction of your efferent arteriole. And then your angiotensin 2 also stimulates reabsorption of sodium in the proximal convoluted tubule. And yes, it will trigger the release of aldosterone and antidiuretic hormone. Okay, and so what is the action of your aldosterone here? It stimulates the kidneys to retain sodium. And then your antidiuretic hormone, it stimulates the kidneys to reabsorb more water. Okay, that is for your action of your ADH and your aldosterone. So the end effect is, there is an increase in systemic blood pressure. Okay, that is the end effect of your renin-angiotensin aldosterone system. So this is the algorithm of your renin-angiotensin aldosterone system. Okay, and so in response to your low blood pressure and low plasma sodium by your juxtaglomerular cells and your macula densa, you have here the secretion of your renin. Your renin will what you call this, convert angiotensinogen to angiotensin 1, and your angiotensin 1 is converted into angiotensin 2 by angiotensin converting enzyme, and this angiotensin 2 has its actions, causes vasoconstriction and what you call this, sodium reabsorption in the proximal convoluted tubule, and release of stimulates the release of aldosterone and antidiuretic hormone. Okay, that is for your renin-angiotensin aldosterone system. So you have here, after glomerular filtration, the ultrafiltrate that is present in your Bowman space has what we call this specific gravity of 1.010. Okay, the ultrafiltrate is the same as blood, but it does not contain free plasma protein or any substances bound to protein, and it does not contain salts. And again, the specific gravity of the ultrafiltrate present in your glomerular or in your Bowman space is 1.010. Okay, that's the specific gravity of the fluid present in the Bowman's space. Here, tubular reabsorption. Please note that substances are returned to the blood in this case. What blood? What part? Okay, and so please note that your tubules, your kidney tubules, they are surrounded by peritubular capillaries. Okay, and so the blood present in your peritubular capillaries. You return the remove or the essential substances that are removed, okay, or that are filtered, are returned to the blood, to your capillary peritubular capillaries. Okay, mechanisms of absorption or mechanisms of tubular reabsorption, you have active and your passive transport. Biochemistry, same lang po. It needs, in your active transport, it needs a carrier protein in the membrane of your renal tubular cells. And then you have your passive transport. Okay, and so this one, the difference in the concentration gradients allow the movement of molecules across the membrane accordingly. That is for your mechanisms of tubular reabsorption. In this case, you have here, again, please note that the red one here, okay, this red one, or somewhat, I don't know the color, is it brown? No? Okay, and so, yes, this is your blood vessel. This is your peritubular capillary. Okay, your peritubular capillary. In reabsorption, the substances from the tubule will move to your capillary, peritubular capillary. Okay, and so like your glucose, amino acids, sodium, water, and others. Okay, and so yes, let's move on. You have here your substances that are what they call this transported via active transport. In your proximal convoluted tubules, you have your glucose, amino acids, salts, and uric acid. Okay, and then in your ascending loop of Henle, you have your chloride ions are actively transported. In your proximal and distal convoluted tubules, you have your sodium and chloride ions. Okay, in case of passive transport, you have water. Okay, and so water is passively transported in all areas of the nephron except your ascending loop of Henle. Okay, in your ascending loop of Henle, this one is impermeable to water. Okay, and yes, your urea is passively transported in your proximal convoluted tubule and ascending loop of Henle, and then sodium in chloride ions in your ascending loop of Henle. Okay, and so that is for your active and that is for the substances that are actively transported and passively transported in your different areas of the nephron. Okay, and so yes, okay, please note that your proximal convoluted tubule, it has the cells present in your PCT, they have brush border microvilli. Okay, and these processes present, your brush border microvilli, they facilitate in reabsorption. With that, your PCT, that is the major site of reabsorption. Okay, and yes, this portion of the renal tubule accounts for 65% of the renal tubular reabsorption. In other references, it is greater than 80%. Okay, and so yes, for your maximal reabsorptive capacity, that is the maximum rate of reabsorption of a solute by the tubular cells. Again, this one is by your tubular cells. And your renal threshold, that is defined as your plasma concentration at which the active transport stops. And in case of glucose, the renal threshold of glucose is 160 to 180 milligrams per dl. Or in millimoles per liter, it is 8.88 to 9.99 millimoles per liter. Okay, and so that is for your tubular reabsorption. Okay, and so before we move on to the next slide, please note that the specific gravity of the fluid leaving the proximal convoluted tubule is 1.010. Again, 1.010 is the specific gravity of the fluid leaving your proximal convoluted tubule. Is that so that it's still 1.010? Please note that solutes and water are reabsorbed. Okay, and so again, please note solutes and water are reabsorbed, giving you still a specific gravity of 1.010. Same with the specific gravity of the ultrafiltrate present in the Bowman's space. Okay, and so you have your urine concentration. Your urine concentration accordingly begins in the descending and ascending loops of Henle. And yes, the filtrate accordingly is exposed to high osmotic gradient of the renal medulla. Okay, again, your filtrate is exposed to high osmotic gradient of your renal medulla. Okay, and so for this one, you have here your countercurrent mechanism. This is a selective reabsorption process that serves to maintain the osmotic gradient of the medulla. Okay, and what happens here is water diffuses out in your descending loop of Henle, and sodium and chloride are reabsorbed in your ascending loop of Henle. Again, the reabsorption in your what we call this the reabsorption in your ascending loop of Henle is what they call this done to prevent the dilution of your medullary interstitium, because your medullary interstitium, this is or it has a high osmotic gradient. Again, it has your medullary interstitium has a high osmotic gradient. And yes, please note, sabi po earlier we said that your ascending loop of Henle, it is impermeable to water. Okay, and so this one also is to prevent the excessive loss of water. Okay, and so that is for your urine concentration. And yes, again, the hypertonicity present in the medulla enables the formation of a hypertonic urine. Final urine concentration begins in the late distal convoluted and continues to the collecting duct accordingly. And yes, reabsorption of water and sodium in the distal convoluted tubule and collecting ducts is controlled by hormones aldosterone for your sodium and antidiuretic hormone for your water. And yes, please note, don't forget that water is never secreted by the tubules. It is never secreted by the tubules. It is selectively not reabsorbed. Again, it is selectively not reabsorbed. Okay, and yes, it is controlled by your antidiuretic hormone also. Okay. Okay, this image here is seen in cases of, or I mean, in the absence of antidiuretic hormone, while for this one is in the presence of antidiuretic hormone accordingly. Okay, and so please note that yes, in the presence of EDH, the collecting tubules changes so that it becomes permeable to water. And yes, the concentration in the interstitium of the inner medulla increases accordingly. Okay, and so for that. Okay, finally your tubular secretion. Okay, and so what happens here? The substances are removed from the blood to the filtrate for excretion accordingly. Okay, that is for tubular excretion. And yes, your waste products that are not filtered by the glomerulus are eliminated, are secreted to the lumen of your tubules. Okay, and the major site of your secretion, tubular secretion, is your proximal convoluted tubule. Major site is your proximal convoluted tubule. Okay, also your tubular secretion regulates your acid-base balance through secretion of hydrogen ions. Okay? Substances that are secreted in your proximal convoluted tubule, you have your hydrogen ions, ammonia, weak acids, and bases. And then in your loop of Henle, you have your urea. And in your distal convoluted tubule, you have hydrogen ions, ammonia, potassium ions, uric acid, and some drugs. And then in your collecting tubules, you have hydrogen ions, ammonia, potassium, and some potassium ions and some drugs accordingly. Okay, and so this image here is the secretion of your hydrogen ion and the mechanism of filtered bicarbonate reabsorption in the proximal convoluted tubule, and the other one is your secretion and formation of titratable acids. The regulation of your acid-base equilibrium, accordingly, kidneys selectively excrete acid or alkali in the urine. Excess alkali, you have excretion of sodium salts like sodium bicarb, or excess acids, excretion of titratable acids. Please note that the regulation of your acid-base equilibrium relies on the tubular secretion of hydrogen ions. Okay, hydrogen ions are secreted in exchange for bicarbonate ions. Again, hydrogen ions are secreted in exchange for bicarbonate ions. This one takes place in the proximal convoluted tubule. And yes, the secreted hydrogen ions, okay, and so the secreted, they are already present in your tubule. The secreted hydrogen ion combines with phosphate ions, and of course, this one will be excreted. Also, the secreted ions can combine with hydrogen ions can combine with ammonia produced by your distal convoluted tubule to form ammonium ion, which of course is excreted. Okay, and so this mechanism is important to maintain the blood pH at 7.35 to 7.45 accordingly. Okay, and so that is for your renal anatomy and physiology. Okay, and so thank you and see you around. Tara, akyat tayo.